Acting Assistant City Manager with the City of Albion. Linda sends her regrets. She is unable to attend tonight due to having class in Detroit. She wants to thank everybody for participating in this event. We're excited to be a rising tide community and take advantage of technical assistance such as developing a unified community branding event. Please welcome Ben Muldrow, who is a community branding consultant, and he will do the rest of the presentation for this evening. Thank you again for coming out.
Thank you, Haley. Thanks so much to Linda. Thanks to Maggie. Thanks to Eric, everybody that helped out during the process, and then everybody that came out over the past 3 days. For those of you, if this is your first meeting, just so you know, we kicked this off on Tuesday morning. It's the first time I've ever been to the community, toured around town, spent all day Tuesday in meetings, had a public meeting Tuesday night, then had another meeting for business owners and everything on Wednesday at the chamber, and then have literally just kind of immersed myself into the community. I accepted the challenge to try to eat at every single restaurant that you have. I think I've been pretty successful there. Got some new favorites. So literally everything that you're going to see tonight has been created since yesterday. And so there's a lot going on. But I think one of the biggest things that I really hope for you to be able to take away tonight is how thoroughly impressed I was with your community. I have the unique and distinguished kind of privilege to come in and share a community with itself from an outsider's point of view. As I said, I've literally never been here before. And I have been thoroughly amazed at the things that I've seen, the stories that I've heard, and the people that I've met. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some ideas that we came up with over the past couple of days, and then we'll have a little opportunity to have some Q&A at the end. Make sense? All right, so let's jump right in. And for those of you that we're doing a recording as well, so obviously we'd love to have everybody in the community here. We've got a great turnout tonight, but we're also recording this entire presentation, and we'll have that posted online tomorrow. So folks that couldn't join us tonight will still be able to take advantage of the presentation. So where I always like to start, it's real easy to kind of jump right into the pretty stuff. But a lot of times when we think about marketing and branding and telling our story, we have to start with some of the logistics. We have to understand what are the dynamics here, what's going on in the market, what's the reality that exists. So I just wanted to share some interesting things that I came across as I was doing some research. First of all, a little bit about the overall dynamics here as it relates to a comparison to Michigan. You're a lot younger. Median age than the state of Michigan. The median age in the state of Michigan is 39. The median age here is 29. You're a very, very young community. Now, a lot of times, the first thing that you hear there is like, okay, good, we've got a lot of youth, we've got a lot of energy. But then there's also another side of that stat that says that probably means that we don't necessarily have all the amenities that we need to allow people to age in place and stay in this community as they need additional assistance. So, you always have to think about all the different aspects that a stat gives you. Your poverty rate is a good bit higher than the state average. I don't think that surprises anybody. The median property value is almost a third here what it is statewide. Again, I don't think that surprises anybody. We heard a lot about the affordability of the housing stock that's here. And then the other thing is the median household income is about 60% what it is at the state level. Now, you can get really depressed by some of those numbers, but the overall cost of living is lower here. When your housing cost is that much lower and then your median household income cost is lower, you've got a little bit of equilibrium in terms of the ability to live and have a good life here. So don't get too depressed, but there is obviously room for economic growth. And I think everybody here knows that and is excited about the future of that. The next thing I always like to look at, and again, I understand these are horrible slides, but they are important information. What you see on the left-hand side is called an inflow-outflow map. This is done by the U.S. Census Bureau, and what it does is it looks at the city of Albion, and 448 people live and work in the city. Every day, 1,336 people come into the city from outside to work. And every day, 1,991 people leave the city to go to work. Okay? So what's really cool, though, is when you look at this chart, what this shows you is this shows you the directions that they travel. They're traveling far more east and west than they are north and south. And the majority of them are traveling east. And those that are traveling east are traveling, you have 16% of your population of employees that are driving more than 50 miles to go to work. Okay? So again, this is just important information for us to know. When we look at downtown redevelopment and we look at wanting to create new retail opportunities in our downtown, we understand that those 1,900 people that are leaving town to go to work every day, chances are they're doing a good bit of their shopping where they're working before they come back. And if you don't have the retail connections with the jobs that are coming in, they're waiting until they go home to do their shopping. So you have to understand the current trends and kind of retail operations of your customer base. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about that? We could literally spend an entire conversation, an entire hour digging into that, but I think those are important kind of foundation knowledge just to know. These are the things that are fueling our recommendations and fueling kind of our understanding of the community. This is an interesting chart from a website called Data USA, and what it does is it breaks down all of those jobs that you do have and shows what types of jobs they are. So the red is the big red block, educational services. That's pretty much Albion College. The red block next to it is hospital and healthcare and social assistance jobs. The yellow, manufacturing, retail. So you can see it's kind of a pretty diverse breakdown actually when you see the jobs. But these over here, a lot of times your public administration, information technologies, finance and insurance. Some of the ones that tend to be slightly more affluent industries are probably trending a little smaller than you'd want them to be. So again, just shows us additional information about the community and the market that we have. And then the final thing that I wanted to share is we heard a lot this week about diversity. And I have to be honest, I hear people talk about diversity in virtually every community that I work in. We do a good bit of work in Wisconsin. And when they talk about diversity in Wisconsin, what they mean is they have a lot of Norwegians and Swedes in the same community. So the thing that we see here is this is a comparison of the racial diversity for Michigan compared to Albion. But it also, the scale isn't exactly the same. So this top line is 60%, where it's only 50% there. Yes, ma'am. I know. I'll tell you what this is. So the peach color is white alone. The yellow is black or African American alone. The purple is Hispanic or Latino, Asian alone, 2 or more races, and it kind of goes down from there. So what you see is you really do have a far more diverse breakdown, definitely than the state as a whole. Now, you have this really interesting dynamic because typically racial diversity is directly tied to size and urbanism. So you are a place that has a small town dynamic with a diverse community. But one of the interesting nuances about it is although you are diverse, you are actually less diverse than the state when it comes to people who were born in another country. So you are domestically diverse. It's a really, really interesting dynamic that you have here. So again, all those are just information that help to kind of lay the groundwork.
Ben, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so looking at the breakdown of ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying that, the first column.
Just so you know, I'll see if I can make it easy. For you guys, you're sitting at about 55%.
Oh, we're over here.
Yeah, this one's you.
Okay,
This-
you didn't even need to answer
sorry.
the question.
Okay, but just so you know, the numbers kind of are pretty interesting. You're sitting at about 55% white alone, and you're sitting about 31% black or African American alone, where the state is sitting at almost 68% white alone, and sitting at about 18% black or African American alone. So it is definitely a more diverse breakdown. So then from there, what this really leads us to is it leads us to starting to create the components of a brand toolkit and identifying those brand values that we want to preserve. And this is where it gets funny, because I think a lot of times people, they like to jump right in. It's like, show me the logo already. But when we're working with communities, if you were here on Tuesday night, you remember I said, the thing that's so interesting about community branding is in a community, you have no control. You can't force people to play nice together. So the best thing you can do is have a multifaceted approach that allows different partners in the community to have varying levels of commitment in which they can participate in a community brand. So what I always like to do is I like to start out with introducing the simple concept of every community needs to have and understand the difference between a destination brand and an organization brand. Most communities have all kinds of organization brands. They have a chamber logo, they have a city logo, have a tourism bureau logo, have a this logo and a that logo, and there's never a logo that represents the community. In fact, in most communities, the closest thing that they have is their high school logo. So what we want to do here is we want to introduce a tool that has not really existed. A destination brand that is owned by no one and shared by all. And then we also want to show how components of that system can help make other entities, their communication stronger, and show a visual tie from one another. So that's what we're shooting for here. Now, where we started was we started with 6 main colors, 2 blues, 2 greens, and 2 golds. We knew that the river was a thread throughout the community. We knew that we wanted to have blues in there because of that connection with the forks and just, I mean, the simple dynamics that it introduces into the community. We're also, I felt like one of the words that kept coming to mind was lush. This community, just the way that your built environment interacts with the nature that surrounds you is really, really beautiful. The fact that you literally have parks tucked around every corner. You have 4 million square feet of park space in the city of Albion. And to be able to be dedicated to a resource like that is really, really amazing. But then I knew that I wanted more than just the natural colors. I wanted colors that also kind of tied into that warmth and energy that we kept hearing about. Now, I want to be very deliberate. You notice there are 2 things that are missing from the primary color palette. There is no purple and there is no red, right? So purple, for example, the way I see it, the college owns purple. Purple is such a self-contained color. It's a very difficult color to share. So if you really dig in and look at the college itself, they have even deviated from their own gold, where the gold that they use on the academic side is different than the gold that they use on the athletic side. So we wanted to use this gold as the connective tissue, but keep purple for them. And then we also wanted to kind of adopt, we didn't want to adopt a straight up red because that was giving us too many colors that were almost too primary and were kind of driving the color palette to feel a little amateur. But we wanted something that was really warm, that tied into the brick streets and all the historic buildings. So when you expand out the palette, what you start to have is you start to have a very nice complementary system that allows those pieces to fit together and allows us to stitch out all those different kind of storytellers of the community. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So then from there, we start looking at typefaces. And your community was remarkably consistent by accident. It's kind of a funny dynamic. So, when you go through and you look at these, there are a lot of these that are using what are called sans serif typefaces. I'm going to give you a little bit of a lesson. My mom was a teacher. So I went to college to learn that these little things are called doohickeys. That's the technical term. But the difference, that thing is a serif, and a typeface with a serif is called serif, and a typeface without a serif is called sans serif. Sans serif typefaces are very, very interesting. A lot of people think that they're cold and sterile. They're actually designed to be content neutral. They're designed so that you can build the meaning into it. Anybody ever heard of the typeface Helvetica? It's on pretty much all of your computers, right? So Helvetica is the typeface of Bloomingdale's. It at one time was the typeface of Walgreens, Jeep, Crate and Barrel. All these different brands worth millions and millions of dollars using the exact same typeface. Seems counterintuitive. It seems like the thing you want to do is let's select a typeface that is unique that nobody else uses. Let's select a typeface that looks historic because we're old. Well, where are you going to end up there? You're going to end up using papyrus, right? And you don't have to go that route. So being able to go through, and what I actually did was I was inspired by this amazing sign on the depot. Really, really handsome approach. One of the other things that was really interesting to me was I was hard-pressed to ever find your name represented in a way where it wasn't all capital letters. Your name is beautiful, and that sounds kind of weird, but you have to deal with the letters that you're dealt. And your name is really, really beautiful, and it looks really nice in that sans serif, that bold typeface. So what I did is I selected 3 different typefaces. Your primary is a bold, thick sans serif, got a lot of weight to it, looks really, really nice with your name. The secondary, again, is still a sans serif, but it's condensed. It allows you to say more in less space. And then an accent typeface that looks like it's hand-lettered, that's got a personal touch to it. Now, I want you to know, accent typefaces, anytime you use a script, scripts are hard to read, okay? Now, just because they're hard to read doesn't mean you can't ever use them. But it means that you have to use them at the right time. You don't want to put a script typeface like that on wayfinding signage when somebody's driving past at 48 miles an hour, right? But you do want to use it in a place where people can take their time, dig in. Maybe the fact that they can't read it instantaneously will actually slow them down and draw them into your message. So that's why our system is kind of designed the way that it is. And what you see is I made a couple of changes. I didn't want to go with a rectangular O, and I also wanted to go with an L that had a little shorter leg. If you notice when you look at this, these letters look really close together, and these letters look really spread apart. Okay? I wanted something that felt a little bit nicer, tighter, more together. Okay? So those give us kind of the components of the graphic system. So then from there, these are some of the words that we heard repeated over and over again during the input meetings. The community is safe. It's welcoming. It's diverse. It's innovative. And the whole conversation about innovative was such a cool one. We're a community that is historically innovative. You know, we were innovative in the 1800s. That's a really cool dynamic to be able to have. We're hardworking. We're artistic and we're musical, and we have momentum. We are currently moving forward. So what all that leads us to is it leads us to something that we call a brand statement. The brand statement is a narrative that really stitches together those comments that we heard and helps us to land on the direction that we think the community should go. So if you'll bear with me, I'd like to read this to you. We're Albion, Michigan. For hundreds of years, natives were drawn to this special place where the Kalamazoo River forks. On its banks, they celebrated this beautiful place, a place to gather, a place to trade, a place to celebrate the abundance that nature provided. In the 1830s, the early settlers were also drawn to the bucolic forks of our river. And fueled by the power of its waters, a community emerged, harnessing water to power mills and transport crops. And from its early days, education has always been held in the highest esteem. When first founded, Albion College was teaching natives and settlers, men and women, with the belief that education was a valuable connection shared by all. And Albion College is still shaping the future today around its historic quad and introducing the world to the warmth of the place we call home. As the railroad came, businesses blossomed. And on this industrial stage, we see the dynamic blend of creativity and productivity as the factories of Albion innovated solutions and developed new standards that drew the interests of entrepreneurs around the globe. We defined hard work and a loyal community. From our factories that brought immigrants to our schools who have drawn those eager to seek the torch of knowledge, Albion has an amazing dynamic of a truly diverse place that has preserved its small town feel. From the unique flavors celebrated at the Festival of the Forks, to the live music performed in our parks, restaurants, and theaters throughout town, our community is truly that, a community. We are a river town and we are a trail town. We are a college town and we are an arts town. We're a place where things are made, crafted, shaped. We are a place of true connection, a place with 21 bridges that span our river, a place with 4 million square feet of parks, a place where T-ball was invented and Mother's Day was first celebrated. We are a place with streets paved with bricks, neighborhoods lined with trees, and friendships made of gold. We invite you to discover this place we call home. We are Albion, and we are naturally connected.
I want to look at it.
So what that really does is that takes all those things that we heard and puts it into this storyline that really leads us to this very, very simple phrase, naturally connected. That's what we do. That's what we're focused on. Now, when you see the stylized A, it's represented of 2 forks. There's so many things that go into this simple icon. We've got water, we've got diversity, we've got the river, we've got outdoors, we've got trails, we've got an upward momentum, we've got energy. One of the biggest things that came out loud and clear was you have too many storylines to try to have a logo tell that story for you. What you need is an icon that can come to represent all that you are. You have to earn that representation through use. You have to get it out there and share it so that it earns meaning. But the simplicity of it allows you to build value and build what we call brand equity. What I really like about this system is as you start to look at it, you've got a lot of versatility in it. The way that it's designed to be versatile. You can use it. Simplifies down into single colors. It has varying options where you've got verticals and horizontals and stacked versions. And then you start to see this look and feel, this freshness that you can introduce that allows you to introduce people to your community. I mean, I'll tell you, how many people knew that there were at least 21 bridges? Okay? So I'm sitting there walking around taking photos, and I'm like, wait, I'm confused. Well, I think I was just here because I was at the bridge, but no, I was at a different bridge. And then finally it was like, okay, I'm going back through the community and I'm counting because there were bridges everywhere. Such an interesting dynamic. those of you that have children know there is something magical about a bridge. You know, I've got 5, and they figure out a way. We went to a lot of trouble to build that bridge, and they figure out a way to still get wet. But, you know, being able to have that dynamic, it further reinforces all those storylines. I mean, even to the fact that part of your own Main Street is a bridge over the river. And some of those buildings that are built right on the river are pretty awesome. So you just got these great stories to tell. Now, then one of the other things that we want to look at is the ability to have adaptations to tell smaller stories. So this is a downtown variant where we simply introduce this idea of feel at home. We want people to connect with this place. It's not good enough to try to get people to live here. We need them to live here. We don't want this to be the place that they lay their head. When we see nearly 2,000 residents leaving every day to go to work, that dynamic is the dynamic that can lead to a disconnected community. So you have to use programming. You have to use introduction to the businesses. You need to use events in a strategic way so that those people that live here truly establish ties here. And that downtown, it is the place where your unique identity is born. So it is absolutely okay for downtowns to be treated with special treatment. I hear that in every community. They're like, why are all you doing is focusing on downtown and you're not doing anything with the strip center? Well, you decided to move to the strip center. Like, the strip center is designed to be like everywhere else on purpose. Downtowns are designed to be different. So being able to have that tool to tell that story. And one of the other reasons I wanted to do this was I had an opportunity, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, to meet with a small group of members of the business community in downtown who gather together and literally they spend an hour getting on the same page, making sure that everyone knows what everyone else is doing, sharing so that the community can better know what's going on in downtown. It was really, really great, and I wanted to give them some tools that would make it easier for them to tell a story of downtown. In addition to that, you've got this amazing trail system that comes through town. You've got multiple trails that overlap and intersect. So being able to take that icon and begin to create variants of it so that it can grow meaning and represent more than just one thing, being able to tie into that river trail is a great opportunity for brand extension. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to introduce, I try to take this opportunity to talk about tactics as well. One of the biggest things that's happening across the country is for decades, we've been spending money on really, really big projects that we thought were going to be catalytic projects. Communities have been spending thousands of dollars on facade grants and all this stuff. Well, the trend lately is let's see how we can spend smaller amounts of money that are targeted on creating vibrancy. How do we introduce color and life to our community? And with these vibrancy grants, oftentimes they're no more than $250. But they allow you to buy benches and chairs and flags and giant Jenga sets and checkers and all this kind of stuff. Give people the opportunity to have fun in your community. Investing in connection through fun. The other thing that's really happening a lot is this idea of guerrilla wayfinding. This is a great example that came out of Raleigh, North Carolina. There was a grad student who went through the community in the middle of the night and put up a series of non-sanctioned wayfinding signs. And everything was scaled to walkers and bikers. Everything was in minutes instead of miles. And these signs stayed up for months before the city realized that there was no department in the city that had been responsible for putting them up. And then, of course, they took them down. And when they took them down, the community rallied. And the city ended up, instead of making them on corrugated plastic like they had been the first time, recreated them in metal and installed them properly throughout the community. With all the trails that you have, this is a great thing for you to think about from more of a trail side wayfinding system. Being able to talk to people about what can you experience when you use the trails. Something else just to highlight, if you can see this one, it has a Blue Cross Blue Shield logo in the bottom corner. A lot of healthcare systems are very much interested in partnering with health-oriented trail signage to be able to get people out on the trails. Then from there, you're a community. We heard a lot about the arts. I want to see your arts make its way into almost the mundane. If you've ever seen these tactile strips at corners, you know, this community went and made them look like welcome mats. We've seen a lot going on with crosswalks. Your trail connections and your trail pathways through the center of the community oftentimes pass over our roads, making sure that those connections are very, very clean and easy to see. There's a lot going on with what they're calling horizontal murals, being able to turn those crosswalks into art pieces. There's absolutely no reason that you can't take the passion this community has for art and take it down to have a strategic purpose of connections as well. You always have to throw the McDonald's option in there too. So we talk a little bit about the destination brand, but we still have to think about those organizational identities. So we've got the city government, and I don't know whether you've realized this or not, but it's kind of interesting. City governments have jobs and tasks that aren't always popular. You know, taxes, garbage pickup, things like that, right? So even in the greatest of communities, the relationship between the city government brand and its constituents can always be strained. You want to be able to have ways that the city government can tie into the brand system, but you still want to preserve enough difference that people understand the difference between formal actions of the government and the energy of the community itself. So what we do is we always start out with the seal. You've had a seal that's been around for quite a while. It seems like it's been updated several times. I went through and just kind of looked at it one more time, and I think one of the things that typically happens with seals like this is somebody will hand carve a seal in 1883, and then that becomes your logo. And then after it gets photocopied 7,000 times, and then, you know, a photo of a JPEG of a photocopy of the original carving becomes the only logo that you have, you end up not having the appropriate tool. Now, this one that we see, it has been cleaned up. The outsides, you know, the edges and stuff are in there. But I do think that preserving that seal is an important tactic, and making sure that the art is the highest quality it can be. You could sit there and you could go through long, extensive processes to redesign the seal. But the seal is a very formal representation of the government. It's been around. There was thought put into the components that make up there. People do not decide whether or not they're going to invest in your community based off the design of your seal. That's not the purpose. So having something that's clean, easy to use, vectorized, scalable is always good for us. Being able to tie it in with those colors and the word type. So now all of a sudden you have more than just the seal. It seems like the city was doing some of this on the website. The website looks very professional, but having a system where you can have all those different variations is very, very good. Now, I didn't mention it, but one of the reasons that we started with the light blue and dark blue was because I find your water tower to be striking. It looks really, really nice. So when you got a giant water tower, that's a pretty good place to start with for colors. But you can see having these different colors introduced, it gives you that opportunity to have some continuity through the organizational identity. So now all of a sudden what you start to see is you start to see the emergence of this system that is coordinated but also strategically apart on purpose. You can go through and you can start to use this to expand it through. You have some departments in the city that need to be really flashy, like recreation. And then you have some like public services that are visible but don't necessarily need to go over the top with how they look. So understanding what services are getting delivered, what that interaction with the constituency are, and then figuring out what's the best way to connect those dots. Making sure that every opportunity you have to convey professionalism and reinforce that brand. You know, I made a point to pull a 2012 pickup truck. This is not an implication that you need to go out and buy new vehicles. But as you acquire new vehicles, just thinking about a very, very subtle graphics treatment that kind of conveys the delivery of service to your residents. And then it gets fun, the brand extension. So we've got multiple organizations throughout the community that have recently adopted new logos. So Albion Economic Development, if you see on the left-hand side, that's the new logo that they adopted. So what I always like to do is always like to show a very simple way that pre-existing identity can tie into the system. So literally all we've done here is change their typeface and added a couple additional colors. And that's it. It's the same colors that are in the logo, but it makes those words stick out and helps you understand what it is that you're doing. And then their logo might say Albion Economic Development, but what does everybody call them? EDC. So being able to have a logo that represents who you are is really, really important. The chamber also recently went through a redesign. So we have the new chamber logo up top. Again, the colors in coordination. We pulled their dark blue as our dark blue. They're using sans serif typeface. But being able to introduce just a graphic representation of a relatively new function that they're performing in the community of being the community's visitors bureau. Now, this doesn't mean it's a new logo, but every now and then, because of the way that visitors bureaus are funded, it's good to be able to attribute where something's coming from. So simply taking that icon, turning it upside down, and have it represent your visitor-oriented efforts. The introduction of your DDA, and obviously one of the biggest elements that you feel when you're in downtown is the bricks, from the brick streets to the brick buildings. So you've got colors that kind of tie in. We overthink these. DDA logos do not need to be sexy. You know, believe it or not, the coolness of the logo is not the thing that determines whether somebody wants to be involved with it or not. So being able to clearly show what an entity is doing. I know some of the backstory on kind of our current status here with DDA, but I do think that in the coming years, we're going to find that this particular organization is perfectly suited to be able to do some really dynamic things here in the community. I always like to throw this opportunity out. You know, being able to put a stylized treatment into some of your vacant buildings. If there was anything at all about your community that's troubling to me, it's the vacancy on Superior. And there are a lot of factors that lead to that. I don't want anybody to think that I think that that's a simple solution that you all just have chosen not to pursue. But one of the things that I do know is the downtown is a market. And until that market is allowed to achieve a retail density, all of the pioneers that are there now are going to struggle. And there's this phrase in downtown revitalization that says every pioneer has arrows in their back. And, you know, the thing that we want to do what?
That's their bank account.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that we want to do is we want to try to achieve that retail density. We want to go through and we want to attract businesses that have the highest probability of succeeding. So in addition to all the graphic stuff, one of the other things that we did is we performed a retail leakage analysis. So we looked at a 10-minute drive time from the center of your downtown. We looked at what business categories consumers in that area were spending on elsewhere. And we're going to be able to share back with you some of the business types that make the most sense for you to try to court into your downtown. Because if you can assure or help best as possible to assure that a new business will be able to be successful, then that is the best dynamic for your market. And the thing that's really interesting is if a business goes out of business in Albion, the business owner never gets blamed. The community does. They always say, see, I told you that wouldn't work in Albion. Nobody ever says, I wonder if they had a well thought out business plan and were well capitalized. And nobody ever says that. So you're protecting the viability of your market. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about real quick is this. We've come to this kind of interesting realization where in historic downtowns, buildings that were built for historic retail might actually be too large a square footage for modern retail to thrive. So in America, the average square footage of a historic retail space is about 1,800 square feet. And if you take the national average in retail commercial rent, then that means that this is costing about $1,986 a month. Now, I know those numbers are going to be higher than we're seeing here, but still, this is kind of the exercise in simple math. If your building properties are lower, your rents are lower, and the proportions still work. But the thing that we've started to see is office space typically can demand slightly higher rents with more stable clients. So what if we introduce the idea of demising walls? Split the space, office use in the back, retail in the front. You can go through here, and if you take 600 square feet out of the back and preserve a 1,200 square foot, then that $1,900 rent now drops to $800 rent. If you go through and you create a true micro retail bay in the front and then have a big office in the back, the building owner can actually see 50% more revenue from their space, and you're still preserving the retail density of your street front. This is a perfect example. This is in the town that I live in, Milford, Delaware. This was an engineering firm. Now, is anybody in the audience engineer? Oh, good, so we can talk about engineers. Engineers are weird, right? So all these offices on the front were vacant because all the engineers said they had too much light in them. So what we did was we showed them how they could reclaim just the front side offices and turn them into small businesses. And what this does is instead of having this giant gap of no interaction for a pedestrian, we've now shrunk that gap, created more activity, created smaller space that allows a person to potentially be successful because of the financial obligations. And what's kind of interesting is they did that as a temporary solution, and then all of a sudden, the engineers left and a music school moved in. And now they use all these front bays as music lesson rooms. And I was telling Jim last night, they've installed a garage door on one, and they can roll it up and you can hear music being played as you're walking around downtown. So great opportunity to see that evolution. This is another one. We had this giant blue box of a skating rink. Not sure if anybody's delved into the financial economics of a skating rink in 2019, but they're mind-boggling how those work. We kind of forecasted that, guess what? This probably isn't going to be around that long. But if it is, the entire front third of the building was unused as a giant, really odd lobby. So we showed them how they could modify the building, put in a couple additional retail bays, and create some more energy throughout that block. After seeing this, the engineering firm from the last building decided to completely renovate this building at a tune of $1.8 million and now have 42 new employees right in the downtown. So you never know what this idea it will show us. The next thing that I was struck by was the presence of music throughout the community. And I wanted to introduce this idea of what we call Albion Harmony. And it's just this brand, you brand the presence of live music throughout the community. You create a platform where you can start to stitch together some of the events that go on throughout the community, and you really just use that to leverage something that kind of happened organically and use that to your advantage. It is truly a unique aspect of your community, but you want to make sure that people have the opportunity to take it in. Yes?
We're all trying to absorb this, and I'm thrilled. This is going to be available to all of us to view.
It will.
Okay.
Sure will.
We don't
Yep.
have to memorize.
You do not have to memorize it. You don't have to memorize it, for sure. So again, being able to go through, have this expandability, this is a great way to be able to stitch together these different activities that go through the community. And let's talk about how this typically works. You know, how do events go on in a community? You have these small committees that put on the events, and then year after year, the committee kind of gets tired of how it looked last year, so they change the logo every year. And then they change the way that everything looks. And then the person who lives in the community isn't really sure, well, is that the same event that it was? Well, I don't know what's going on. By adopting some of these similar foundational pieces, it allows the marketing for this stuff to really overlap and tie in together. But at the same time, like Walk the Beat is not something that's just here. So you can see it's got enough flexibility to be able to tie in to other brand identities that might be pre-existing or might have to be a little more dictatorial in the overall system. And you see what I did there in the primary logo. Instead of just having that path, I introduced a musical staff, because I remember what I learned in 5th grade music, which was the last time I played a musical instrument with a plastic recorder. I can barely play an iPod. Like, it's, you know, I appreciate it and have no talent. So I love everything that's going on here in the community. And then finally takes us into the category of kind of telling that story. I'm always, doesn't want me to show you the t-shirt. There's a t-shirt there. You know, one of the things that we know about communities is if you have a t-shirt for your community, chances are it's what I call a car wash t-shirt. It's like one of those really ugly t-shirts with 7,000 logos on the back of it that you were given for participating in something, and you had to kind of figure out how to partially smile and say, thank you, I love it. And then the only time you're ever going to wear it is when you cut the grass or paint something. You know, being able to have merchandise that people want to have and want to wear. It's so great to come into a community that literally has a store that's focused on selling the connection people have with the community. So, I mean, Pure Albion gets it, but there's absolutely no reason that once the toolkit is out there, that any business can't take advantage of it. If you sell coffee, put the logo on coffee mugs and make them available. You know, that's the kind of way to allow people to connect with the brand while still making money. For some reason, we villainize profit. I want you to get rich off of the passion people have for their home. So being able to make the tools available goes a long way. Something else that was kind of interesting, these are some of the signs that you see throughout the parks. This interesting little half tree A kind of thing going on. I kind of like the abstract nature of it. I think when it came out, probably in 1984 or so, it's probably pretty cool. And it's actually, I mean, they're not bad. You see the bottoms are painted green. The trash barrels are painted green. I don't know if there's a system. I know that some parks have yellow ones and some parks have orange ones. I was able to pull that all together. But how do you take this stuff, keep it in play, but also have it reinforce the brand? So again, you can go through and create very simple vinyl wraps for the trash cans. If there is a system like that's green park and that's orange park and that's yellow park, I'm not smart enough to figure it out. So I think you might be better off here. And then what this shows is this shows a very, very simple refresh to the signs. Simply giving a color base paint to the bottom, repainting the metal of the tree add-in, and then adding a graphic bar down to the side. Now all of a sudden, you've infused freshness into a sign that was starting to look a little dated, but it completely eliminates the the desire to, hey, we just need to knock these down and do something new. No, they're really good bones. So this is a good way to keep that fresh. Then you start to look at comprehensive wayfinding systems. Being able to take that brand and take it all the way through the community. I was able to find one wayfinding sign right in front of the Ludington Center. And it's a good sign, but you know, one of the things that we typically see with these, if these are anywhere close to a state highway, they are controlled and monitored and kind of dictated by a stunning document called the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices from the federal government. It is it's an exciting read, I will say. But what I'm showing you is I'm showing you design standards that comply to all the MUTCD standards. Having these gateway signs, these typically happen at your city limits, but then in most cities, there's no communication again. So the funny thing about that is typically when you stretch all the way out to your city limits, that's not necessarily the most well-maintained parts of your community. So welcoming here, continuing on with what we call trailblazer signs. Trailblazers, typically the vehicular scale trailblazers need to minimize to 3 or 4 destinations only. Then once you get into your downtown, you can go a little bit more with a vehicular/pedestrian scale. Then introducing your banner systems. Like for you all to think strategically about your banners. So what I'm showing here is I'm showing a system where your banners actually help educate people about what's going on in the community. So you might have one that exists throughout campus. You might have one for the downtown district. I love the idea of introducing banners anytime there's a bridge. So you can start to make those connections as you're traveling over the bridges. And then at your trailheads and trail access points. So a lot of times people think that banners are just pretty. If you're going to spend the money, make them strategic, make them work for you, help people use those banners to understand what your community has to offer. And then finally, I always like to show just kind of a standard composition of how you tell that story. I took this picture this morning, absolutely stunning, picturesque community. You got these great amenities, you got great public art throughout the community. You know, walking through and just seeing the different park spaces, and literally when I was here, you can't really tell, but there's a guy and a girl sitting there on the bench, just like hanging out, chilling. There were people everywhere. Having a restored theater right downtown, showing first-run movies, that is a huge win. Our community would kill to have that, and we're almost twice your size. Having an old music store that's lasted for 60 plus years, fantastic amenity to have, especially with all the live music that goes on. Children's Museum right in downtown. I mean, you just got win after win after win. Typically when I do this, because my process is so quick, I try to get, 25 photos or so just quickly going around. I've got like 150 here. And so I could have gone on and done ads for days and days. But being able to tell that story, being able to connect the dots is really, really important. And then understanding what the next steps are. This is overwhelming. It's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. And then, obviously the next question is, yeah, but how are we going to do this? Who's in charge of this? How are we going to make this a reality? We try to make this as easy as possible. So what we do through this is we're going to share the video, and for the next couple of weeks, we're going to have opportunities for people to share their ideas on refinements. And for those of you, I think everybody probably knows Linda at this point. Linda has been a fantastic point person for this process. She is really, really organized and does a great job of being that person that kind of consolidates that information. We have a branding task force. The branding task force is going to reconvene. They're going to go through the recommendations, and then they're going to offer up revisions and changes and additions to me. And then we're going to create a completed toolbox. Now, this toolbox, when it's completed, that doesn't mean it's done. It's kind of just means it starts. This is ever growing, ever evolving, ever changing. But It's going to include a style guide document. The style guide document is going to tell you all of those. It's going to identify the colors, going to identify the typeface, going to tell you how to use it, tell you how not to break it. You know, it's kind of like a good parent, like, hey, do this, don't do that. In addition to that, we have a comprehensive brand launch checklist. This is not saying you have to do it in this order. That's not how this works. We need people to understand these are all the things that need to be done eventually to have a well-implemented brand system. You need to know what your resources are, what your partnerships look like, and identify what your low-hanging fruit are. We've also created a how to be a brand partner page. This is intended for organizations in the community, event organizers, and our business community. And it simply shares with them ideas of ways they might incorporate the brand system into what they do. Building rollout through the private sector. And then finally, we've also included a score sheet. So you can revisit this in 12 months or 18 months or 24 months, score your implementation, and then use this tool to help identify the next round of the low-hanging fruit for implementation. Make sense? All right, that's all I got to share with you today. So now it's your turn. I said it was going to be an hour, it's 7:02, but we're doing pretty good. We started a little bit late because technical issues, so I'm doing all right. I'd love to answer any questions anybody might have, hear any thoughts, anything that you want to share. Yes, ma'am.
You did an excellent job.
Thank you.
I was very impressed.
Thank you.
And I'm kind of hard on people. So yeah, you did a really nice job.
Thank you.
It's things that you saw as tools. Another thing is that naturally connected is kind of a bitter irony in this town because sometimes we don't feel naturally connected.
Right.
And so it's really a nice bridge over like what seems to be an obstacle sometimes.
Good. Thank you. And you know, I'm glad that you said that because a lot of times people ask, you know, should a brand be? Does it have to be completely true now? Can it be aspirational? Can it help you? Like, you don't want it to be a lie, but it's also absolutely okay for it to have some aspiration built into it. And there's enough about that statement that is true today, but there's still some aspiration in it. I hear exactly what you're saying, and I understand and agree completely. Like, we heard so often that one of the things that you all cherish about this community is its people and the relationships. But you have to constantly nurture those relationships. And if nurturing those relationships isn't top of mind, then those relationships begin to falter. So it kind of puts a little bit of a challenge. You know, it's kind of like, if we're going to say this, we probably got to live it as well. So thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I agree, but I'm also thinking, kind of along the same lines both of you were talking about, but just watching all of this together, it gives you warm fuzzies, you know, and you talk about aspiring to be, you wish to be. I mean,
Right.
you know, and you kind of can kind of feel like, even though it's not all the way there, well, we're kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at all the things that we have going on for this community, the things that you just, I mean, I knew, but to actually see it like this.
Right.
And then, you know, it really does have it going on. You look at the parks, you look at all the reasons that we can have it, and, you know, to be more intertwined or naturally connected.
Right.
You know?
Right. Awesome. Yes, ma'am.
I said it the other night, but I'll say it again. It is the most refreshing thing I've seen in years. Outside, never been here.
Right.
To find all these absolutely wonderful things. We all know,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't tout ourselves to be this kind of community.
Right.
And we need to.
Absolutely.
You're presenting the catalyst that will allow us to shine.
Good.
We
Good.
have it.
Absolutely.
You
And
saw it,
I
need to.
I want you to know, I mean, you know, I do this every week. I'm a pretty positive person in general, but there's some communities that I go to that just don't have a whole lot of stories to tell, if I'm being honest. You guys have a ton. I mean, I still have a whole list of things like the equestrian centers. I want to see how we can do some storytelling and even maybe look at logo expansion there. Like there's a whole list of different things that I heard about that are just like there's too much for me to tackle, and so being able to, that'll be one of the other things in this refinement process is stuff that's like, hey, I see that, can we do this as well? Absolutely. The more the merrier. The wider this system can touch, the more likely it is to be successful. Yes, ma'am.
Did you talk at all about Albion's relationship to its sister?
I did not. And that's one that I heard that story. I heard the French market and all that kind of stuff, and it was one that I just didn't. It didn't make its way in. It's not because I didn't think it was important. I was speaking with Linda earlier today, and one of the things that's beautiful about that brand statement is if you notice the way that it's almost written in what we call modules, so that individual paragraphs can kind of be pulled out and be somewhat self-contained. I think that's a really, really great story, and I'll see if I can write kind of a self-contained part of that because it just didn't make it in.
Can I just say briefly, the French government considered it stated in their parliament that this is the finest relationship France has.
Wow.
It is 20 years. Yesterday, one of our students,
Right.
this summer, 2 of the French will be over here looking to be interns. In 4 weeks, we have 10 Albion kids headed to France, and on the 2nd of July, we will have 10 French guests that are going to tour Michigan on the Michigan
That's awesome.
trails, and they'll begin here.
Very cool.
Part, especially with a lot of the kids.
Absolutely. Thanks for pointing that out. And again, it's one of those things where it's like juggling a lot of balls, but I appreciate you sticking it out. Yes, ma'am.
The reason you found only one wayfinding sign was because of the regulations that you mentioned, and also the money that didn't come for it.
Absolutely. I understand. I completely understand. It is, if you've ever been involved in that process, you will quickly realize that we all chose to be in the wrong business and should be in the sign making business because those suckers are expensive. So thank you. Any other comments or thoughts? Anything else you want to make sure that we hear before we get out of here? Yes, ma'am.
Do you see one-time fundraisers tying into this broader long-term?
I definitely think broader long-term, but I think that we definitely have seen communities will go through and they'll launch it, and I want to be real mindful of this. When you launch this, the thing that you have to understand is we're always really quick to take the story outside of the community. We're really quick to try to take it to a different market, get somebody to come here. But the market we need to be most concerned about is our own friends and neighbors. We've got to shore up our community pride first. We have to share this amongst ourselves so that the army that's willing to tell this story grows. So what you want to do is you want to tackle the growth in pride first, and then typically a byproduct of that first phase rollout is an increase in giving and an increase in interest in participating. So don't lead with the ask, but get a little warm fuzzy going, and then the ask starts to come. Great question. Yes, ma'am.
This is a presentation that obviously has a lot of energy around it, and a lot of it comes in you speaking and walking through it. And if you have this out on the internet for the rest of the community to see, it sounds like a great theory, but it probably won't happen. I mean, we want, 30, 40 people in this room, and maybe 70 will see it with any energy.
Sure.
Is there a way, or maybe it's Linda, or maybe it's someone local, that this can, in a venue similar to this, that we can bring it back up? And because a lot of people, like the people that won't pull it up on the internet, potentially could be lured down here with an event that you'd have energy and,
We're in the second
something where it would attract people to come down and see it.
Free help room, come watch the presentation.
Absolutely. So what you're really asking about is you're asking kind of about launch strategies, and there are several different theories behind it. I'm kind of a big believer in, we all know there's a relatively small core of people that are doing the majority of the heavy lifting right now. If the first wave is getting the buy-in from the core and the rollout from the core, then being able to go through, and it sounds counterintuitive, but you know, you go through and you start using this sucker for 6 months or 12 months, and then you publicly launch it. So that all of a sudden you'd have this event, you share the thought behind it, you share the enthusiasm, and then all these partners that have been incorporating it, they've already gotten some of their stuff out there. So the people start to see immediate gratification on it. It sounds weird, but it's kind of like if you open a business and you've been open for 3 months and then you have your grand opening. You know, it's kind of like, hey, we worked our kinks out first. Do that soft rolling launch and then plan that kind of launch event. We've had brands rolled out at festivals. We had one community that decided they were going to publicly launch it by changing the graphics on their municipal vehicles, and they did it all kind of in the dark of night and then rolled it out during the Christmas parade. You know, so just make it yours, make it your own way. But the biggest thing that I caution against is, even though it might be very exciting, don't go and throw a big party and then still have months before there's any implementation for them to see. It is far more important for you to be able to show that you're using it than it is for you to be able to get them excited right at the beginning. So there's some very simple, cost-effective ways. Street banners are a great way to be able to put it out there in the public space, incorporation into some of your event organizations and that kind of thing. And in addition to that, I spend enough time in Michigan that if the time and place is right, I would love to come back to the community and do that. We've done that before, and I'm always willing to help in that way. I do love what I do. I hope that it comes through in the way I talk about it and the way I share it, because I believe that relationship between people and their community is one of the most sacred relationships that people have. So I'm always around to help and would love to be able to help. So we've got, let's do like one or two more. Did you have one you were going to ask?
I'll ask that.
Okay, perfect. Anything else? All right, guys. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your time. So, just so you know, recap real quick. The video should go live tomorrow. It'll be available and will be shared throughout social media. And if you contact Linda, she'll be able to share it with you. Then in the next coming weeks, we're going to reconvene that branding task force. So, you know, that's the Erics and the Haleys and the Lindas and the Jims and the, you know, folks from all over. If you contact any of those, they'll be able to tell you, you know, they'll be able to kind of take that feedback and kind of share it back with the community. My goal would be that for sure by mid-June, I'd love to be able to have everything wrapped up and ready to share. As soon as I get the green light from the task force, we'll prep all those files and we'll make everything available. We're going to, through that single link, we'll make the style guide available. Every single logo we created, we'll save it in all the different color formats. We'll save every logo in 5 different file formats. So if you don't know what that means, it means you have what you need. It means you have a Phillips head screwdriver and a flathead screwdriver. And all the photography that we take, we're going to give you that. So literally, it will be all the resources that were generated are now yours to use free and clear. Yes, sir?
Where will all this live?
So it's all the permanent living spaces in our digital archives, because that's where we keep all of our communities. It'll be accessible through just a single web link.
Okay.
So it'll all be online, and then the partners will also, you know, the first thing I always say is download a full copy of the system to your local machines, and so you have that available.
Right.
Yep.
And that'll include a font style
Well,
to install?
yep. It'll include, those will come in open type format, so it doesn't matter what kind of computer you have. So Awesome. Y'all, thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure. I've had a great time this week, and hopefully you're excited about some of the potential of what could come out of this, and I appreciate your time and participation.
Thank you.